Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Around the Big Ten Football podcast. I am Mark Givler. Got Chip Minnick here with me as always as we continue our 2025 schedule breakdowns, team by team in the Big Ten. We are at Northwestern. Boy, is this going to be an interesting one because there's a lot to try to unpack with Northwestern. It's been a rough go of it since we'll call it the Pat Fitzgerald situation, which I still don't know that we really have closure on or really are sure who to believe on that. But, they've tried to kind of revitalize things. Beautiful new facilities on the lakeside, got a new stadium coming. But they've kind of been nomads a little bit here. This past year, we'll be again playing some games at Wrigley, and just kind of a tough team to kind of get a feel for at this point. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, certainly. I think David Braun, the job he did, considering the circumstances a couple years ago, was tremendous. That big, the Coach of the Year awards, well deserved. But you and I think would agree, and probably our listeners and viewers would agree. Okay, this is unfortunately, we're in the world of what have you done for me lately? And last year, all of that goodwill is gone. Northwestern, I mean, they struggled. They went back to kind of, I mean, if we're going to be completely fair, probably the kind of season that people anticipated David Braun was going to have the year previous. I mean, it was one of those things where nobody thought Northwestern was going to be a good team. And then when David Braun led them to a bowl game, his first year out was tremendous, but they kind of reverted back to where people kind of, to be fair, probably thought, okay, this is kind of a little bit more along the lines of what Northwestern's talent level really is.
Yeah, and I think, before we get into like the specifics of the schedule, I think this is a tough landscape right now for Northwestern to operate in. And I think if the legislation that's kind of passing through right now, if that gets upheld and, we get into a more of a, for lack of a better term, kind of a salary cap type of system, I think that may be more beneficial to them. Northwestern's a different place. It's a very unique school in terms of the college athletics landscape. Boosters want to fund academics. Boosters want their names on buildings. It's hard to go to a Northwestern booster and be like, hey, we've got this collective over here. We're paying 4 and 5 star recruits. You want to give us $1 million? No, but I'll give you $1 million for a new biology lab. But they, the whole fundraising to buy high school players just is not really a culture thing. So if things can come in-house a little bit and with some salary cap type rules in place, I think Northwestern probably would favor that landscape much more as they try and acquire the talent necessary to compete in what is now just a loaded Big Ten. Chip, let's look at the schedule here. Just kind of first thoughts as you take a glance at this, and then I'll read it off for the people who are listening.
They don't have to play Ohio State, which is always a good thing. But I mean, it's one of these things where, I mean, they've got a lot of it's an uphill climb to be completely honest. When you look at the games that they have to go on the road, Mark, you also mentioned the fact that at the end of the season, having some games at Wrigley, which I know that it sounds exciting, but okay, when you are going to be the quote unquote home team, having Wrigley Field completely taken over by the visiting team, it's going to be kind of a daunting thing. So, like you said, when you start reading it, I think the fans will understand that. All right, it's going to be a long shot for Northwestern to wind up on the winning side of the ledger.
Yeah, that Michigan game at Wrigley in November, that's going to be Michigan fans are going to flock to that.
Sure.
That's going to be a cool thing for Michigan fans. So it's just how it was with Ohio State last year. Ohio State fans kind of packed the building because it was cool. Well, let's go to Wrigley. It'll be a cool road game experience, unique, kind of a once in a lifetime thing. You're going to have that you're dealing with, with some of these games. And But for those who are listening, here's their schedule layout. They start at Tulane, then they're home Western Illinois, home Oregon, bye week, home UCLA, home Louisiana Monroe, at Penn State, home Purdue, at Nebraska, bye week at USC, and then home for Michigan at Wrigley, home for Minnesota at Wrigley, and at Illinois. Man, like they get some break here in the fact that, like, you get Purdue and you get them at home, and you get UCLA and you get them at home, but like you have to play Oregon, you're at Penn State, you're at Nebraska, you're at USC, you're at Illinois, and then you have Michigan, and it's like, geez, there's not a lot of breaks there. Even like coming out of the gates at Tulane, which has been one of the better, group of five, if you will, programs over the last decade. That looks like a game where you may lose that game. I mean, would anyone be surprised if they lost at Tulane? I wouldn't be.
No, that's kind of my thought, is that, going on the road at Tulane, and like you said, the Tulane, the Green Wave have been one of the better group of five teams. The fact that Northwestern is going on the road in week 1 does them no favors. My personal belief is, for Northwestern to have a bowl game, they need to win all 3 of their non-conference games. So that means, stealing that game in week 1, beating Western Illinois, and then just by the way that the schedule was shaping up, they play Louisiana Monroe in October. If they can win all 3 of those, they may, and I want to emphasize the word may, be able to get 3 of their conference opponents, but it just looks very difficult.
Yeah, I just looked up the line here, and they're 6.5 point dogs at Tulane. So they're like touchdown dogs at Tulane. So that's not great. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. They have like a lot, again, their facility on the lake, magnificent. They are spending now. Again, the new stadium's coming, but it's just kind of keeping things together until that time comes. And then hopefully maybe getting a better draw from the Big Ten on the schedule next year or in 2 years, because that's, Purdue at home's nice, UCLA at home's nice, but there's a lot of games there where it's like, woof, like that, you're playing tough road games, cross-country road games, tough environments. You got good teams coming into town. It's just a very daunting schedule from where I stand. And yeah, I agree. If they can steal that Tulane game, that could have a whole different vibe to their schedule. I mean, if they could steal that Tulane game, it's not out of the realm of possibility they could start 5-2.
Oh, no.
Because you get Western Illinois at home, Louisiana Monroe at home, UCLA at home, doesn't travel well to the East Coast, Purdue at home, who's not very good this year. And then, you're going to lose to Penn State, you're going to lose to Oregon, but like you could legit be 5-2, and then it's like, oh my goodness, can they just steal one of those last 5 games and get themselves into a bowl game?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's not impossible, but it's highly unlikely because, all right, let's say, all right, I mean, I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, all right, they start out 2-0. I'll, just for the sake of argument, I'll give them what you just described. Okay, they get UCLA, ULM, Purdue. Okay, so like you said, they're 5-2, but I'm looking at those remaining games, and they're not going to be favored. They're just not. No. And it's one of these things where we've already referenced the fact that it's going to be very discouraging. I completely agree with you that just like Ohio State fans, Michigan fans are going to be flocking to Wrigley Field. I would presume there might be a similar type of a mindset by the Minnesota fans because it's the same thing. And when they go on the road to Illinois, you and I are both on the record as saying that Illinois should be pretty much cruising at that point. So it might be one of those things where I think that that's kind of my, best case scenario is the 5 wins. But I could also make the argument in terms of like, I feel much more inclined to knowing kind of, that where the floor is with this team is, possibly just winning 2 or 3 games, winning maybe like against Western Illinois, maybe Louisiana Monroe, maybe Purdue or UCLA. But I just don't see Northwestern having it, even with the move at quarterback with Preston Stone at quarterback. And I think now you're looking at if you're David Braun, that like now like how much of a hot seat are you on, because now you're going to be that guy that, all right, you're not really producing, and we want to be excited about going into this new stadium. So, and as you said, like it's still out there, the Pat Fitzgerald resolution in some way, shape, or form, is kind of, I don't want to say hanging over, but it's out there. That, who knows if that's going to play a factor in Northwestern season this year. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a tough year for the Wildcats.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because they're basically asking, hey, we know you don't have a home field right now. Like all this stuff's in limbo, but go out there and overachieve. And if you don't, we're going to fire. Like you may get fired. Like he's not really getting set up to succeed, in my opinion. And it's one of those things where if it doesn't work out, that I would still give him a shot somewhere else, because I don't think this is indicative maybe of the caliber of coach he is. I think he's kind of being dealt a tough hand. Hopefully they stick with him. Hopefully if you let him guide you through the crap, that you at least let him come out the other side and try and put this thing together once he has all the resources he needs. But we've talked like about just about every team. We talk about like what's a key point in the schedule, and usually it's something like late September to mid-October. This is, for me, is Tulane.
Yeah, you're right.
I think beating Tulane could be the difference between like winning 5 games and maybe having some interesting games in November to try and get bowl eligible, and like losing 10 games. Because there's just not a lot of games where you're like, yep, that's a win. Like, check it off. There's maybe 2. I'll give them Western Illinois. I will give them UL Monroe, because that's a struggling program right now that just lost any decent player they had to the transfer portal, it felt like. But even like Purdue is like it's not a layup for them. So I think setting the tone against Tulane would be a complete game changer for what the outlook of their season could be.
Yeah, I mean, and that's unfortunate for Northwestern to kind of have those odds stacked against them. But yeah, like how they play against Tulane in the season opener, I think is going to be I don't want to say an accurate, but a pretty good barometer of what the 2025 season is going to look like for Northwestern.
Yeah. So now that we've lost all the Northwestern fans with our doom and gloom, yeah. whoever's left listening and watching this, best case, worst case.
I'm going to say best case is that 5 win. I just don't see it. Hey, I'm at Chip Minnick. Last name is spelled Minnich. You can come at me, but I hope I'm wrong, because in all fairness, I think when Northwestern is traditionally, I don't want to say, they're ever like, one of these teams that within the Big Ten is like considered a powerhouse. But I always do enjoy I've always enjoyed over the last 30 years when Northwestern has been the kind of team that is not an easy out. And so I'd like to see Northwestern definitely be a factor within the Big Ten as kind of a spoiler. But yeah, I'd say best case is 5 wins. I'm with you, Mark. I really do think that worst case is going to be that 2-10, which would be very difficult for, I think, Northwestern fans, especially, we talked earlier about the way that the season ends up on the road at Wrigley Field when you're supposed to be the home team. I think it would just be very difficult psychologically.
Yeah, I think we have the exact same range on this. I think worst case is 2-10. I'm going to give them Western Illinois. I'm going to give them UL Monroe. But like, I don't see a path to beating Oregon. I don't see a path to beating Penn State. I don't see a path to winning at Nebraska. I don't see a path to winning at USC. I don't see a path to beating Michigan or Minnesota or Illinois.
Right.
So
it's tough.
They could run the table on the other 5 and go 5-7. So I guess I'm with you there. Now I think what will likely happen, and Captain Obvious here, but I think they're probably a 3 or 4 win team. Like, I don't 5-7 even, I think, feels a little high to me. And 2-10 is like, wow, everything went wrong. Like, you didn't even steal the Purdue game at home. You didn't get anything. You didn't beat Tulane. UCLA comes across the country and they never, they're not really a great team on paper this year, and they're coming all the way across the country. You can't steal that one either. So I think this is a 3 or 4 win team that has a very, very challenging conference schedule. I think they did not get dealt a great hand here, and it's going to be interesting. But if they could win 5 games this year, no one's going to want me to say that as a Northwestern fan. Like, the fans will never want me to say that about anybody. But like, if they can win 5 games this year, I think that's a job well done. I know that's like everyone gets a trophy talk or whatever. Like, I get it. If you're not first, you're last. Like, believe me, I subscribe to a lot of that. But like, looking objectively at the schedule and what you've got, to me, not having a home stadium, like, really, like, I think 5-7 would be a great year for this team.
Yeah. And who's to say, stranger things have happened when it comes to like bowl game situations, when like with, like the APR a few years ago, like Minnesota was the beneficiary of that. And we talked about, and this is meant with all praise towards Northwestern, kind of like what their focus is, like Northwestern would be a very likely candidate to be a bowl team in the event of like APR issues or something like that. So yeah, if they were to be 5-7, that would be another job well done by David Braun.
There are many programs around the country. I'm not going to mention names. There are many programs around the country who fancy themselves as academics first, and it's so much harder for our football players to get into school here than at other schools. Northwestern and Stanford are the 2 that really actually walk the walk on that. There's a lot of schools that claim it, and they're really recruiting the same kids everybody else is recruiting, but they'd like to feel superior and say that their kids are higher academic standards and blah blah blah. Which I don't buy at all, because I cover recruiting and I know which schools are recruiting which kids. But Stanford and Northwestern do things quite a bit differently. And so yes, it's always a feel good story when Northwestern is competitive, and they've made some Big Ten championship game runs.
Yeah,
exactly. Over the years. Like, the other thing I'll say is, because I want to end this with glass half full, because this is not, I understand, like, this has not been the most positive outlook podcast episode we've ever done, but Northwestern is maybe the one program in the Big Ten historically, and by historically, maybe like the last 20 years, where preseason predictions have almost been worthless for this program. Especially under Pat Fitzgerald, they would have a good year, return a lot of the team, and everyone would be hyping them up. And then they would like face plant and like go 4-8. And then everyone would be off the bandwagon, like, oh, he's lost the program and they lost all the stuff. They didn't do well last year and they had all their guys back. How are they going to do well this year? And then he finds himself winning 8 games. Like, so this could very well, we've even seen this with David Braun. They were not supposed to be any good his first year. They were solid. People thought, oh, he's got something going here. Certainly year 2 leap. And then they kind of face planted last year. Maybe this is the year, we see it again where it's like, hey, everyone thinks they're a 3 or 4 win team and they win 6 or 7 and they're in a bowl game. So I would at least say that, like, if there's one school that prognosticators like us have completely whiffed on over the years, it's probably Northwestern. They just have been all over the map based on their expectations. They've been very, very hard to get a read on over the years.
Yeah, I would change. The only thing I would change of what you just said is like, probably, I would say definitely about, not even being able to accurately predict what's going to happen with Northwestern. And you're absolutely right. I think Northwestern, this is the kind of program where Pat Fitzgerald, and his predecessor, the late Randy Walker, they kind of figured out the secret sauce with Northwestern. And that's, David Braun, who's to say maybe this offseason getting Preston Stone, maybe a better quarterback play. Maybe that's all they need, because offensively it was, that was a very, very obvious glaring weak spot for Northwestern. Maybe if they can get better play offensively, that's all they need to get them into that winning threshold.
Yeah, tough to watch offensively.
Yes.
The last couple of years, even a couple of years when they were good, when they were a solid team, it's been tough to watch. They've had quarterback issues for a while now. And is Preston Stone going to be, the second coming? Probably not. He's got a lot of experience. He's been productive elsewhere, and I think that's going to be a big upgrade for them. So for me, that's one thing. And then the other thing is, like, it felt like, and maybe this is a product of Pat Fitzgerald not being there anymore, but it felt like, even whether they were 8-4 or 4-8, it always felt like their defense was feisty. You walked off that field if you were one of their opponents, knowing you were in a 60-minute game, and they made you feel them. They may lose the game, but you're gonna know that you were in a football game that day. And I felt like they started to lose that a little bit too. And so they got to get a little bit of that back. They've always had some good playmakers on defense. I know they've lost a few to the portal in recent years that weren't able to kind of finish out their careers there, and that obviously has hurt them as well. It hasn't just been a developmental thing. It's that they've developed guys and then they've transferred somewhere else. But yeah, they got to get back to those two things. They got to get better quarterback play, and they got to get back to being a very physical team on defense. And that will be their path back to a bowl game. Parting thoughts, Chip?
I completely agree with everything you just said. I think it remains to be seen. The prognosticators have usually been wrong. Excuse me. When it comes to Northwestern. So we'll see if that's the case this year.
Yep, we will absolutely do that. And thanks again, everyone, for watching, listening. We only got a few left of these to go, but we're getting them knocked out. Big Ten Media Days coming up on Tuesday. Looking forward to all that. We'll have coverage here on the YouTube channel. We'll have all the head coach press conferences, and we'll have a lot of the player interviews and things like that from Big Ten Media Days here at youtube.com/@SaturdayGlory. But until next time, thanks everyone again for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you soon.